Okay. We are going live in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
This meeting will be conducted in accordance with State of California Executive Order N29-20, dated March 17th, 2020. I think that should be 2021. All members of the Rental Housing Committee are participating in this meeting by video conference with no physical meeting location. Members of the public wishing to observe the meeting live may do so at mountainview.legistar.com, on YouTube at mountainview.gov/YouTube, and on Comcast channel 26. As noted on the meeting agenda, members of the public may provide oral public comments during the public comment period for an item by signing up at mountainview.gov/RHC_speakers or by phone by dialing 669-900-9128 and entering webinar ID 937-7306-8363. Any emails received by 5 p.m. today were forwarded to the Rental Housing Committee. Emails received after 5 will not be read during the meeting, but will be entered into the record for the meeting. Now we'll proceed with roll call. Andrea, can you do that?
All right, let's start with Chair Almond.
Here.
Vice Chair Haynes-Livesay.
Present.
Committee Member Ramos.
Here.
Committee Member Rosas.
Present.
Committee Member Parda Dizella is not able to join us this evening, so we'll move on to Committee Member Grunwald.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, and then we're having a presentation. Am I supposed to say that? Oh, there we go. Yay!
I just wanted to commemorate that we've been holding Rental Housing Committee members for the last 4 years. And this is our 50th meeting. So congratulations to you all. You've accomplished a lot in the past 4 years, and I think we're an efficiently running rental housing program. So congratulations. Pew! Fireworks!
And we couldn't do it without all of you, Anki, Patricia, and Andrea. You make the trains run on time.
And Karen.
And Karen, of course. I'm not looking at her picture, and sorry, Karen.
And this slide is for Emily.
Oh, it's me passing the gavel off to Susan? Oh, how wonderful. So I don't have a physical gavel to pass it off, so it's on the screen. Congratulations, Chair Allman. I hope you have a lot of fun doing this. I actually certainly had a lot of fun doing this. And congratulations on leading this new committee.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you for your leadership and your patience and your ability to sort of troubleshoot. When we started this on Zoom, you know, we all didn't know how it would. It seems like it went seamlessly, and I'm sure that's also due to the IT and our staff, but Emily put in lots of hours, and I really, really appreciate all that you've done. And I'm sure everybody else does too. Thank you.
Woo!
Okay, we're on to minutes from the April 19th, 2020 meeting. Would any member of the public on the line like to provide comment on this item? If so, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. Staff will keep time and announce when 1 minute remains. Now, where do I see if people are on the line?
If you pull up your participants screen, click the button at the bottom. And once that pops up, you'll click over to attendees.
Okay. I see the list, but nobody has a hand raised.
That's correct.
Okay. So, seeing no hands raised, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I will motion to approve the minutes.
You will motion? Do I hear a second?
I have my hand raised, but I can second.
Okay, great. So that means we need to call for a vote, right?
Yep. Would you like me to?
Yes.
Okay. So we will begin with committee member Grunwald, who will be voting today.
That's a surprise to go first. Aye.
Committee member Rosas.
Aye.
Committee member Ramos.
Aye.
Vice Chair Haynes Livesay.
Aye.
And Chair Almond.
Aye.
This motion passes 5 votes to 0 unanimously.
Yay. And we have no consent calendar, so we'll move to oral communications. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the committee on any matter not on the agenda. Speakers are allowed to speak on any topic for up to 3 minutes during this section. State law prohibits the committee from acting on non-agenda items. Would any member of the public on the line like to provide comment on non-agenda items? If so, please click the raised hand button in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. Staff will display a countdown timer on the screen. Let's see. I'm not seeing any hands raised. Does anybody?
There are no comments at this time. Looks like.
Okay. Okay. And we have no appeal hearing, no public hearing, so we move on to new business. And number 9.1 is fiscal year 2021 to 2022 recommended budget.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair Almond and Rental Housing Committee members. Tonight is the first presentation with regards to the budget for the upcoming fiscal year. The purpose of tonight is to review the expenditures and revenues needed for the next fiscal year for the CSFRA program and administration. And the CSFRA empowers the Rental Housing Committee to establish such a budget and a fee to recover the costs to implement the programs of our rent stabilization. So we would like to preface the budget discussions by acknowledging the continued financial impacts that COVID-19 pandemic is causing. Rent relief programs and stimulus programs have been enacted to mitigate against economic impacts that residents and landlords in our community are facing. The anticipated ending of the statewide eviction moratorium on June 30 of this year might result in unknown economic and judicial impacts on the residents and the rental housing market. However, the CSFRA program is not able to sustain the low level of this fiscal year's budget and fees put in place to specifically lessen the burdens on the landlords. Staff recommends the following budget, taking into account the recent adoption of a capital improvement petition process and a pilot eviction prevention and defense program. And staff thinks this recommended budget seems appropriate in order to ensure critical services to aid in the stability of our community. On this slide, you can see an outline for the items that we will be discussing this evening. And after discussing the items, we are requesting any input and direction by the public and the committee. The next step after that would be to bring back the budget in a following meeting so the Rental Housing Committee can adopt a budget and a fee. So this slide shows the budget that was adopted by the Rental Housing Committee for fiscal year 2021 compared to the estimated expenditures for the remaining of this fiscal year in the second column, and what is being proposed for the next fiscal year, as well as the changes between the two fiscal years. So for fiscal year 2021, most notably, the revenues are estimated at 1.14 million, which is about 11% lower than the adopted budget, at 1.28 million. And the total operating expenditures are estimated at 1.05 million, which is about $600,000 less than adopted. This was the result from a vacant position, less than anticipated need for hearing officers and facilitation services, some staff time charged to the Housing and Neighborhood Services and other community development department programs, lower than anticipated costs for litigation services, and database system costs not completely spent. This is an overview of the program fees per unit that were adopted by the Rental Housing Committee over time. As you can see, last year, there was this unique situation whereby we used a lot of previous years' amounts to make this a specific lower fee than we would normally recommend. I think the recommended fee at the start of our discussion was $99. So as an overview of the total expenditures, this is proposed for fiscal year 21-22, and the total is about 2.19 million. Both revenues and, could you go back? Yeah. So both revenues and expenditures are recommended to be increased compared to this year. And in total, the recommended expenditures are $233,000 more than the current fiscal year. And this slide shows a breakout by type of expenditure. As in previous years, staff has proposed a combination of employees and third-party professional services, and this is the largest component of the budget. And the combined staffing and professional services are approximately 71% of the proposed budget, and in the current fiscal year, this percentage was 68%. So first, we'll look at the personnel expenditure proposal. Staff has included the following staff in the recommended budget in accordance with the adopted staff plan earlier in the year for a total of $991,000. 5 dedicated full-time personnel are included: 1 program manager, 1 senior management analyst, 2 analysts, and 1 secretary. And I'm happy to say that this week we're going to be having our first interview sessions with candidates for the secretary position. Yay!
Yay!
So the second category of expenditures are the general operating expenses for a total of $176,000. This includes outreach, printing, and mailing materials for a total of $150,000, advertising costs, training costs, furniture and equipment, considering we have 2 new staff coming on board, and general office expenses. Then the third category of expenditures is the third-party professional services for a total amount of $569,000. And this is a list of all the outside services that we are using. And we propose to continue our combined staff versus third-party provider combination for our program with outside legal services, maintaining at a level of $175,000. The Mountain View Rental House Line helpline, indispensable for us to answer day-to-day questions from landlords and tenants. Hearing officer services, we maintain that at $100,000. Litigation services, $100,000. The newly adopted eviction program services for $45,000. Slightly lower amount for the pre-hearing settlement conferences. We are maintaining the same level of service for tenant relocation services, facilitation services, our broadcasting KMVT, thank you guys, and the translation services for $5,000. I also wanted to mention for the previous slide that the total of $569,000 compares to $555,000 for the current year. The major changes are less $25,000 for litigation costs, and of course the additional $45,000 for the eviction services. Next slide. So 3DI is continuing to further develop features for the database system for the CSFRA. You might say, when is the next phase due? But they're in the middle of a long process of trying to incorporate our whole petition process into the database. So that is taking quite some time, and it is a complicated work. But they're working on it, and we're seeing progress from week to week. So the money will be rebudgeted that was left over from this year's budget of a total of $120,200. And we are also reserving our yearly software license fees, first for the 3DI hosting of our database and also for CoStar. Then what we also see coming back every year is the city resources and administrative support. It's budgeted for indirect costs related to the implementation and operation of the program. Utilizing the city resources eliminates the need for directly and independently obtain additional personnel or services. Indirect costs include finance and administrative services. They were wonderful in helping us put together today's budget proposal. They do accounts receivable and payable. They do payroll services, purchasing and contracts. We have HR helping us with the recruitment, information technology for when our computers go down or we need new software installed, office space and other costs identified as general liability coverage, equipment replacement, and benefits. So the budget is adopted annually, and any funds that are not spent or legally encumbered, meaning contracted or committed, would lapse at the end of the fiscal year. but there's one item staff would like to propose to be rebudgeted. And this is an item that was one-time in nature, including in the current fiscal year. And the purpose continues to exist, and that is the money for the IT database system. The funds for this item carried over from this current fiscal year and do not impact the fee calculation as proposed for next year. Then the Rental Housing Committee also has decided over the last couple of years to establish a 20% reserve for the CSFRA. And a reserve is typically established to protect against declines in revenues or if additional unforeseen expenditures would be required during the fiscal year. Example of this could be that actual litigation costs might exceed what is budgeted. It may not always be the case that higher expenditures can be absorbed by savings in other areas. So in order to maintain the 20% reserve, it is recommended to add $31,000 to the reserve. So since the CSFRA is a full cost recovery program, an annual fee has to be established, and that is calculated by taking the total budget minus the ending balance and rebudget divided by the total number of fully and partially covered units. As you can see, for 21-22, the recommended budget is $1.629 and $600 divided by the total number of units, which is 14,950, which would come to $109 per unit for the annual fee. I also want to mention that there was previous discussion regarding a petition fee. And at this time, if the Rental Housing Committee would like to revisit a petition fee, then staff requests that direction from the Rental Housing Committee, and staff can review and come back with a recommendation. So normally the city bills this fee in January together with the multi-housing inspection program. Alternatives to this recommended fee calculation would be to increase or reduce expenditures, or to increase or decrease the reserve to be complete.
Anki, I couldn't hear you for that last item.
Oh, it says increase reserve, but you can also decrease the reserve.
Right.
I forgot to put a word there.
Okay.
So this recommended budget represents staff best estimates of all the services that will be needed for the next fiscal year, taking into account the two new programs that the Rental Housing Committee adopted. If any expenditures are reduced in the budget, the proposed fee could be reduced accordingly, and an increase in the budget would increase the proposed fee. If funds are not sufficient, then staff may need to return mid-year for additional appropriations, and any shortfalls that might not be able to be absorbed could impact the fee in the following year. So staff is requesting any comments or direction on the recommended budget for this fiscal year 21-22. And based on, yes, the next slide is fine. So based on the feedback provided, staff will return at the next meeting for budget and fee adoption. This completes the presentation, and we're happy to answer any question. That's it.
Okay, and I think I go to public comment first, right?
Actually, we do deliberate. The Rental Housing Committee has the opportunity to ask questions of staff first.
Okay.
Then we go to public comments, and then it goes back to the Rental Housing Committee for deliberations.
Okay. I have one simple question on personnel. I thought we were only adding the secretary position. Are we in fact looking for 2 people?
Actually, the secretary position, there was already an office administration position, and we just leveled that position up to a secretary level, and the Rental Housing Committee approved 1 additional staff, a senior management analyst.
Okay, and isn't that one of our current staff?
That needs to be an HR process. And maybe some of our staff might apply for that position, but you have to formally apply for each position in the city.
Sure. Okay, that answers my question.
Mm-hmm. So, Susan, you now need to ask, does anybody have any questions?
Yeah. Does anybody have any questions? And I see that Vice Chair Haynes has her hand raised.
Thank you. I just wanted to benchmark on the litigation estimates. I know we're bringing it down by 25,000. Roughly year over year, about how much have we spent in litigation costs in the past, let's say, 2 to 3 years? Like each year, roughly.
Yeah. I think so. In the beginning of the year, the first year we started with 2 lawsuits, and one of them got resolved at earlier. So we have 1 lawsuit left, and I think most of the years the costs were in the ballpark of, if I remember correctly, I would say between 75 and 85,000.
Okay, that's sort of what I was thinking, but I wanted to kind of confirm. Awesome, thank you.
Can I just clarify, is that 75 to 85,000 for each lawsuit?
No, together.
Total. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Committee Member Ramos.
Just a quick question of numbers. So your recommendation for this year is to put 31,000 in reserves, and that will lead to a total of how many in reserves?
If we can go back to that slide, it says it over there. No, we passed it.
Yeah.
Here. So we have a total of 195 plus 189 is about 300, close to 400, I would say, thousand. And so we're adding 31,000 to it, which would be 20% of the proposed budget for next fiscal year.
All right. Thank you.
It would bring the reserves to 415,000
There you go.
to maintain the 20%.
Thank you, Patricia.
Yeah, thank you for that. Are there any other questions? I don't see any other hands raised.
Looks like we have Committee Member Grunwald and Committee Member Rosas' hands are raised.
Oh, okay. I didn't see who was first. I'll give Matt deference as senior on committee. Go ahead, Matt.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, so Anki, if we wanted to bring down the fee to about $100, we would need to reduce expenditures by around 225,000. Is that right?
Oh. You want me to do that by head?
Actually, maybe Patricia, since she's already got the set. Looks like she's already got the calculator out based on the last calculation. But I'll ask just a general question. I guess you can get back to me on that. I had a few questions. So the new eviction services pilot that we approved last meeting, does that require additional administrative time?
So what we indicated when we were discussing this program is that staff will be is already implementing a lot of this program. In other aspects, the only part that was missing was the legal component. So the $45,000 is meant to contract with a legal provider for eviction cases. So the $45,000 is just meant to get this third party on board to provide legal services. Is there any extra time involved with? Yeah, we probably, for the startup and the development of the program, to make it a coherent plan and to make it run smoothly, we probably have to kind of put some extra work in there. I think once the process is established, we can run it like any other program that we're running in our rent stabilization program, which I think does not require a whole extra staff.
Got it. So, and sorry, some context for why I'm asking the question and to my next question. I thought from the presentation last time, the city was also adding funds to that program. Is that right?
Actually, I did hear that there was, in the meeting after the Rental Housing Committee meeting, there was a meeting where priorities were discussed and some amount of budget was reserved, but I put my question out there and I hope I'm going to get an answer pretty soon. I think it was an extra $50,000.
Okay.
But I have to yet get that confirmed.
Where I'm going is I'm wondering if, when it comes to interdepartmental, like when we help the city out with programs, or we decide to take a program on, like may be done if when the city kind of figures out their plan for mobile homes. Mm-hmm. How will those chargebacks work, and how do they work today? So specifically, I know that you and staff worked on a presentation for City Council for their plan about mobile homes, right? And did a lot of research. And do they, essentially, do they pay us for part of your salary for that?
So part of why we are under budget is that any time that we spend on non-CSFRA programs, we charge that time to the division that we're doing the services for.
I see. And how much did that net us last year, I guess?
I did not do that calc, and I didn't ask that information from HR, so I don't have that information.
Okay.
And that's highly variable from year to year as well.
Okay. Another question I had on my list. So, in a later item for today's agenda, we're going to be discussing MNOI petitions and volume. And it seems as though that volume is decreasing and is pretty low, but we may expect the capital improvement petition volume increases. For the database, what we're paying for the database development for petitions, could we shift? Are we already building in the MNOI petition, or do we still have flexibility to shift that to development of the capital improvement petition instead?
They're in the middle, in the thick of it. So I don't know if at this point saying we're shifting over to capital improvement petitions, if that would make a lot of difference in the cost. I think we're pretty far along, but we can definitely ask them how and how much that would differ in the costs, if that's what your question is.
Yes. I guess that's the question behind the question is, I'm trying to look line item by line item and see if we can, if there's a path towards getting to a fee that maintains the level pre-COVID that we were at, or below. So I guess any other recommendations for larger chunks of expenditures that you would consider that we might have flexibility for?
So as indicated,
some of that.
Each category has an overview of services, and of course we don't come to this recommended budget lightly. Also taking into account, you would expect in 5 years, we got pretty much a base established of the type of services that we are going to need year over year, but I don't feel we're there yet. With the whole petition process, we're probably going to switch from MNOI to capital improvement petitions. No idea how that is going to influence the services requested. And then there's going to be tenant hardship petitions, maybe related to the capital improvement petitions. So again, that is a whole new program that we're going to add, and it's really, really hard to estimate how many petitions would come in for that. Can we go back to the third-party vendors slide?
Could I provide a little clarification and answer Matt's question about the $100 per unit reduction?
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
So to provide clarification on the petitions for the database process, the same process would have to go through the system to build out for the capital improvement petitions as we're building for, in the middle of building for the MNOI petitions. Basically, once we have one built for landlord petitions, we can model the back end off of that, and it goes very quickly from there. That is what we did with the tenant petitions and why we were able to release all of them at the same time. Additionally, we have the other new petition for the joint petitions. We do not have an indicator of how many of those we're going to see either. So related specifically to the petition process, all of those expenditures continue to be in flux because of all of the changes to those programs that we've implemented over the past year. Additionally, other jurisdictions and our own are looking at the potential increase in MNOI petitions related to the pandemic, and we're not sure how that's going to affect our costs there either, or the impacts on staff and hearing officers. For the reduction to $100 per unit, we would have to reduce the budget further by, from what I can tell right now with these quick calculations, approximately $135,000.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I've taken up a lot of time for questions, but I guess, Anki, what is...
So you were asking where can we find
Yes.
that money, right? So outside legal services is Karen, which we need a lot, and I think the 175 is a right on the nose for our yearly budget for Karen. The Mountain View Rental Housing Helpline, I don't think we can shave off anything if if not having to actually not considered adding to it in the past 5 years. That means that they never got any increase in their hourly cost in the 5 previous years. Then the hearing officer services, we kept it at $100,000, not like previous year, not knowing what will be coming to us, in the hopes that that will suffice. And as Patricia just explained, there's 2 new petition process programs coming on board, and we hope to still be able to cover that with the and maintain the $100,000 budget. Then litigation. So here's the consideration that a rental housing committee can make. If you say, well, we only spent $45,000 last year, this year, why don't we just make it $50,000? And you can always do that, but then if the cost will go higher, we have to take money out of the reserve or come back mid-year to you for a budget adjustment. So those are the considerations you have to make as a rental housing committee. The eviction services, we just adopted this program, so not sure if you want to already take another look at that. Then the following services are really, the $5,000 are really covering the basics, And if we don't have that amount, we don't have that service. It's simple as that. So if we go back one slide up.
If I could ask about a couple, just a few items there.
Okay.
For the helpline, you know, I noticed that's an hourly. Like, I think we get about 1,000 calls a year now. Is that Patricia could probably?
What we have is we have a full-time staff of Project Sentinel working for our program. And this is one full-time staff, 40 hours per week, working for our program. And that means answering the phones, giving people advice and counseling, but also there's the whole petition process that they're managing. They're hiring and recruiting hearing officers. They put part of the whole petition process is in the hands of Project Sentinel, with the pre-hearing conference calls, the pre-hearing settlement conference is organizing, getting the dates together, and there's a lot of documentation going back and forth in evidence folders. I mean, there's a lot of work that they do that happens behind the scenes and that that is not very obvious to the outside public. So that.
Yes, I'm sorry to interrupt real quickly. I was just going to say, is it, do they have any other options for, like, if we have the hotline, if the hotline is available, kind of 8 to 5, or is it not charged that? Is it not charged that way? It's more just full-time staff.
We charge one full-time staff to do all these jobs. So when they pick up the phone versus when they're organizing a hearing, or versus whether they help us give a workshop or do any other outreach, that is all included in the one-time full-time staff.
And to provide further clarification, when you look at the monthly status report and you see public inquiries, that's the initial touch point. That is not how many times they're following up with people or how much time they're spending with that person, or any of the communication that the helpline does between landlords and tenants after that initial touch point. So that's only indicative of the initial communication from the tenant or the landlord or the property owner or the other person in the community that calls the helpline.
Thank you. That's it's helpful. I definitely believe in the value that the helpline has. I mean, I think that is one of our core services for sure. It sounds like there isn't another kind of billing option that they offer. It's pretty much the full-time staff.
Well, they offer whatever we want them to do, but we are convinced we need at least that one full-time staff person from Project Sentinel to help us with all the tasks that they're being asked to do.
And I would like to also mention that they provide us bilingual support as well. Mm-hmm. So the services that they're able to provide are far deeper than what we as staff are able to currently provide in-house. And if anything, they're working far more than 40 hours a week at this point to support our program. Additionally, if staff had to also answer the constant and continual the phone calls that they do receive, we would not be able to do the intense work that we are already doing, because we would be having to do that job instead.
I won't go line item by line item. I do believe in the value of each of these. It's more I'm interested in questions about, like, if any of them offer, if other jurisdictions, have alternative billing structures with how they bill. So for that one, I mean, it sounds like that's pretty set. But
yeah,
even
comparing ourselves to other jurisdictions, I have to say we're the cheapest program there is around, honestly. We are.
And other jurisdictions actually have case managers, people who do the services that Project Sentinel does for us in-house. It's much more expensive for those jurisdictions because they're permanent full-time staff.
And I agree with I think leveraging third parties as we get dialed into what's the right level of volume for inquiries and petitions and everything, I think that makes a lot of sense. So I'm convinced there. I guess maybe the last question is for something like litigation, we could be successful in that litigation, and then we could collect fees for the parties that are currently in litigation with us. Would we be comfortable at all having a lower budget on some of those items where we're not sure how many petitions we're going to get, or if we're going to have new litigation, paying some of that out of reserves, and then seeing if we kind of are successful in litigation, or if we were more aggressive about collecting fees from landlords who have not paid the fees for a few years, which we talked about last meeting, to put that into reserves. I guess, is there any, if we leverage reserves more or work on getting more money into the reserves from some of these accounts receivable that we've had, is there a level of comfort with bringing down the reserves in the short term to keep the fee, to maintain the fee?
It doesn't matter where the money comes from that is going to be put in the reserves, whether that is coming from extra money we're collecting from landlords, or whether that is savings by not having as many expenditures. So I think, and we're still working, Andrea is intensifying the last blast out to the landlords that have not currently paid their fees yet. What is currently expected as actual incoming revenue is probably going to be higher than what we currently have on our line item. But that always comes back to the landlord. And if we have an ending balance at the end of the year, that always gets carried forward to the next year and will not be taken into account when calculating the fee. So it doesn't matter what little pot we're tapping. In the end result is how do we calculate the fee using the actual expenses versus what is budgeted. So we'll definitely put another effort out there in the coming month to calculate, to try and get landlords to pay their fee for this year.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say that we reduced our fee this year, and I think we like Anki said, it was going to be $99, and we reduced it given it was the beginning of the pandemic. And in fact, we provided exponentially more services this year for a reduced amount. And I would hate to see us, clipping back on litigation, and then all of a sudden we have to throw money at that pot because we took it away because we're concerned about this year's increase. I'd be interested what other people feel, but I'm okay.
Yeah, so if you can keep this to a question area, and then we do public comments, and then you guys can deliberate over if and how you want to give feedback on the budget.
Okay. Are there any more comments from the committee? I'm not seeing it.
Lupe had her hand up, so I'm not sure where she's at with her questions right now.
You answered the question. Mine was the one that the previous member, Greenwald, asked you in regards to help from City Council.
Okay, good.
Okay, so are there any other questions from committee members? I'm not seeing any other hands raised. So then, would any member of the public on the line like to provide comment on this item? If so, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or press 9 on your phone. Staff will display a countdown timer on the screen. I'll call on Tim McKenzie. You have 3 minutes.
Hi all, Tim McKenzie, he, him pronouns, about 6-year resident of the Montaloma neighborhood. And when I heard one of the committee members talking about going back to pre-COVID fees, I thought, hey, that sounds great. Maybe we'll go back to that fee of $155 a year which the RHC started with, which works out to less than $13 a month, i.e. about the cost of one burrito with tip per month per housing unit. But instead, the direction that the committee member went down was, how can we reduce costs? My rent has actually gone up year over year rather than gone down. So the fact that the housing fees have gone down is a little bit perplexing to me. That's not generally how inflation works. Like costs, again, with the basic burrito example, costs of burritos have gone up for renters, members. Also, given the huge impact of the COVID crisis, which hopefully we've made our way through the major public health aspects of it, but we're about to see the eviction time bomb coming. And the whole point of the Rental Housing Committee is to implement the Community Stabilization and Fair Rent Act. I think there will need a lot of support to stabilize our community. Things will probably be more hectic over the next year. And it will be really incumbent upon the RHC to work to make sure, keep our community stable and make sure there are fair rents. And by looking to minimize fees to landlords, it doesn't give me a whole bunch of faith. I happen to know some of the other members of the committee don't act the same way. This feels a lot like a few months ago when there was the attempt to completely suspend the RHC. And by pursuing this line of questioning, it's just baffling and mind-boggling. I think that the less than $10 a month, that is the per unit, that is the proposed fee, seems eminently reasonable. And I feel like I'm watching a starve the beast, the classic strategy of saying something doesn't work, defunding it to the point that it breaks, and then pointing to the fact that you broke it as evidence that it shouldn't exist. So I am wholeheartedly against the line of questioning that was just brought up by one of the committee members. And I hope that you follow through with the hard work that staff did to provide a recommendation that will keep things running as we work to stabilize our community, which is what you are charged with. Thank you very much. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you, Tim McKenzie. Alexander Brown.
Now I want a $13 burrito. Damn it, Tim. Hey, yeah. No, we can't see what disasters came. We can't see what disasters are going to come. If we had predicted COVID and how much need the community would have, I feel like we might have put more than 20% in reserves. Seeing the work that the RHC staff has done over the last year makes me think that any dollar is a dollar well spent when it comes to the work of this body and their staff. It's fantastic. And I think that we need to be forward thinking and prepare for things that will come in the future, as opposed to trying to hit an arbitrary target. If anything, I think we should be putting more in reserve and trying to be ready to help as many people as we can, because there is always something coming down the pike that we need to be ready for. And also, again, this is the staff working with a hand tied behind their back because there's a position that has yet to be filled. And I can't wait to see what they do with full staffing, full funding. And I'm confident the RHC is going to do the right thing and continue to fund the programs that help so many people in the city. Thanks.
Susan, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Alex Brown. I don't see any other hands raised from the public. So I think it's time for us to go into deliberation. Who wants to start? Emily, committee member Emily Ramos.
Well, we'll get the hang of it. So I'll start with thank you for presenting us with this budget. Thank you, staff, for getting it all settled. I was surprised with the increase in the fee. This is what I was worried about last year, y'all, because it is something that seems difficult for a lot of people to swallow, that jump in increase. I am not willing to make any cuts, though. We have continually told staff that we trust them to tell us what they need. They have told us what they need in terms of budget. That is generally, I believe them when they say they need this in order to run the program that we have asked them to run. So that I'm not willing to make any cuts in that regard, particularly especially on the rental help line. I wish we could add more funds to that. During this pandemic, when I was chair, there were people who reached out to me from early in the morning till late at night being like, what do I do now? You're on this rental housing committee. I'm just like, I don't know what to do to help you. But in the end, I've always directed them to the rental housing line because that is where they need to go. But it is such a necessary and important resource. And there has always been one of my largest influences in my life has had the saying that budgets are statements of value. And out of all the things that I want to make sure that we are properly funding is how we can make sure the access of the services that we provide to the community are out there and available for anyone who needs it. I can't wait till we get back to precedented times. And that's why there has been an increased need of services and all stuff. I'm glad that essentially our litigation costs have largely come down since we aren't getting sued as much anymore. That's always a great thing, not getting sued as much. So I am hesitant on making any kind of cuts when it regards to services. What I am willing to work with is the reserves. But the thing about reserves is that they do need to get filled to a healthy amount eventually. So if we are going to do something with the reserves, just keep in mind, they're either paying it now or in the future. And how do we want to deal with that? So that is where I lie when it comes to our budget. I am more than willing to pass the budget we're not passing the budget, we're just giving you feedback, right? I'm more than happy to keep the budget the way it is as it was presented. But where I'm willing to wiggle is the reserves. So that's where I'm at right now, and I'll leave the floor to others.
Vice Chair Haynes-Lipsey.
So speaking to that point of the idea of where we could wiggle, I wholeheartedly agree. I don't think we can cut services. I think our services are probably on the lower end of adequately funded. So taking funding away from services in even a little drip or drab to me seems like the wrong direction. However, and I am a huge proponent of reserves. Trust me, I love having reserves. And I also know litigation is very expensive. That all being said, if I have $31,000 I'm attempting to put in reserve, and I have litigation which year over year has been $75,000 to $80,000, I wonder if I run the risk today of stealing from present me and possibly, or stealing from future me and possibly at the benefit of present me by cutting my litigation down by $20,000. So that would bring it down to an $80,000 number. And then shoring my reserves at 31, knowing that I could always swing that 31 back to litigation if I needed to fill and just have another zero reserve year. It's not ideal because I don't like stealing from the reserves. But at the same time, if I'm running at a year over year of about 75 to 80 as my litigation spend, I might be able to tweak there. And I realize this probably brings the fee down by $1 to $1.33 a unit. So it might not be a worthwhile tweak in some folks' mind because I think that's the calculation there. But it's something that I think we might want to consider. And if we consider that, you know, we could also consider a petition fee. But I worry with the petition fee, unless we charge all petitions equally, there is at minimum the appearance of unfair treatment or unequal treatment. And I worry that there are people who won't be able to bring petitions that are needed due to a fee. So I'm not sure this is the year to do the petition fee. I'd be happier funding my reserves at 31 and bringing my litigation projected budget down and swinging that math if I had to. So that's my thought. Others may disagree or agree.
If you wanted to reduce the litigation budget by $20,000, that would bring the fee down to $107.67.
I was right, $1.33. Yay, math.
And I do just want to chime in here. I do think we will probably be going to trial on our one case, and that will be expensive. We're hoping to avoid it, but we're not making progress.
Karen, is that the case with Redwood Villa?
Yes.
And then there's another pending case coming to us. No?
No, not at this point.
Just an appeal, I think.
What appeal?
Yeah, we have a petition, but so far none of our petitions have moved to litigation.
Oh. Okay, good. I don't know, you know, I feel pretty uncomfortable taking money from Peter to pay Paul. I feel like this could be the year that we get a whole lot of petitions and we certainly have to do a whole lot of outreach to let people know about the evictions legal services program. I'm pretty comfortable with 109. I'm sorry that we went to 85 so that it looks like a drastic increase. It's really just bringing it back to what we need to barely cover all of the services we already provide. I don't know how other people feel. Do we want to take, I mean, does anybody have anything else they want to add to this, or do we want to see if anybody has a motion?
I think Committee Member Grunwald has his hand up.
Okay. Committee Member Grunwald.
Sure. First, I just wanted to say that going down the line of questioning for the helpline is probably not the best line item to dig into. I was interested in if they have an alternative fee structure for if we add a per call basis or fee that we're willing to try paying them as opposed to an hourly fee. So that was some of the logic behind that. I am also just interested in year one, we had a $155 fee. We overestimated, and I think we've overestimated every year the number of petitions we would receive. Also in the questions that I asked, all rent control jurisdictions thus far, the number of MNLI petitions decreases the further you get from the base year, right? So we should expect fewer petitions over time, and we budgeted about the same amount for hearing officers each year. And that's why I was wondering if you look at it as like in the initial years, my view was that we were doing a lot of marketing because it's a new program. We want to make sure that people know, and we always approved. I think I've approved every line item that is on this that's come to us because staff makes good recommendations. I think now we're getting to a point where we've agreed that staff needs more help, and we have a lot of programs in place. Like we're sending 12 postcards, 2 newsletters. And I think there's a legitimate question to ask of like, what's the right number of postcards? I don't know what the right number of postcards is, but I'd want to have a legitimate conversation about whether it's 8, and that saves us $32,000, right? And if we can get back to 100, I think $100 would be a symbolic fee to charge. That means that we've reduced it from the prior prior to the COVID year, where it was $101. So we're kind of making progress. We're fiscally responsible, and we're still providing the level of service, and we've added staff. And we've tried out some things, right? This year, we're trying out $45,000 for eviction, the eviction litigation program. That's a pilot. I think we should be free to pilot new things, but maybe we go back and say, maybe we only need 8 postcards, right? Maybe 12 was too many. I'd look to staff to look at us at like where we could kind of trim some of that. That's not essential services, right? The helpline, yes, is absolutely essential. So sorry, that was my feedback there is if we can maintain even 101, right, which is what we were the last year, seems to me to be a symbolic win for us, that we're both providing a lot of service and being fiscally responsible and not necessarily punishing the landlords who are paying the fee. And then we're doing a better job of getting things, keeping things under control. So sorry, I'll say that, like, if I think what Nicole mentioned of some portion of litigation, maybe we'd bring that down to 80,000, bring down a few postcards, maybe have the reserve be 0 this year. And I think we're getting close then to the 100 sorry, Patricia, I think it was 130,000.
But Matt, I think, Anki made a good point that we have probably the leanest budget of any of the Bay Area rent stabilization programs, and we're providing an immense amount of services, and we haven't even seen what the capital improvement petition process is going to bring us. We may have to hire, X number of hearing officers for that. It just makes me nervous to start, stripping away a little bit here, a little bit there. The Project Sentinel program is a, full comprehensive program. It just was, it happened that our staff laid it out as a 40 hours a week. So then it looks like, oh, maybe we could do it on 30. There's a lot that's included in Project Sentinel that is not, just picking up the phone. It's research, it's hiring, it's counseling. I personally am comfortable with 109. I think that, I would rather see us be more aggressive in getting our fees from all of the landlords, increase our income. I wouldn't like to see us start charging for petitions. I think tenants will then not file, I'd like everybody else's input on that, though.
I agree with your, quickly, I agree with your point on collecting all the fees from all the landlords. But that doesn't, to Anki's point, I don't think that affects our budget. And also, sorry, to your last point. Sorry, I forgot what was the last thing you mentioned.
Oh, I just said that I'm comfortable with 109.
I think. Well, sorry, it looked like there was another hand raised there, but I'm open to, or to your point, making sure that all landlords, pay the fee. I'm definitely supportive of that. Just wondering if, I guess, how do you feel about like the number of postcards, which may have been a somewhat arbitrary number that we came to? I don't know if we had, or maybe that would be a question for staff of like, would a reduction in postcards affect awareness of the program? Because I think we were trying out many things and trying to get the word out there. But
we are trying many things. Yeah. So those postcards are meant to communicate any new decisions that are made in the Rental Housing Committee in each of their meetings. For instance, if you're going to adopt an AGA tonight, that needs to be communicated to the community. If there is a new regulations adopted, that needs to be communicated to the community. So there are a lot of instances where we need to have that postcard accessibility and the money to spend that. And other than that, we also want to do outreach to announce workshop dates and topics. So if anything, I would not want to diminish those outreach moments that we built into our budget.
And we do see a distinct correlation with mailings, whether it's postcards, the newsletter that we send out biannually, or outreach, specific targeted outreach. We do see an increase in an impact in all of the services we provide when that outreach does happen. One thing that we found is that our community that we support is often not able to access information electronically, and the information that they're able to receive from those mailings helps us provide more equitable services to the community for a relatively low cost.
Thank you, Patricia. Committee Member Ramos.
Thank you, Chair Allman. So regarding one of the questions, I actually don't agree with doing the petition fee. I don't think we're quite there yet. I think that discussion should happen if we see a pattern of frivolous petitions. I think that's the only time where I'm willing to look at that, where every single petition seems like it has a valid case to it. I'm not inclined to start charging for it. Regarding outreach, it's so important to have a lot of mailings. Coming from, I have printed out a lot of these updates and then tried to go door to door with them. And there are some places that are just not accessible if you go door to door. And there are some places where a landlord will be like, "What are you doing there?" And I'll be like, "Bye." So it's really just important for the mailings, because it is access and equitable access to people where we can't access them in any other way, or volunteers can't access them in any other way to let them know about these programs. So that's my 2 cents. If we could do more mailings, I would be very happy about that. But as Anki would know, there have been so many times in this past year being like, "Can we send a mailing on this, please?" And Anki is like, "I don't know if we have it in our budget, but we'll try." So I'm not inclined to decrease that either. But like I said, I'm beating a dead horse at this point. I'm just like, I'm willing to touch the reserves if we're okay with that, but like know that there's danger there as well.
Okay, thank you, Emily. Vice Chair Haynes-Livesey.
Oh, I think Committee Member Rosas had her hand up first.
Okay. Committee Member Rosas.
Thank you all. Thank you, staff, for the hard work you all did. I know it's a lot of hours. So I just have a question. So I did a little bit of math. And is it $109 divided by 12, which equals $9 per apartment? No? Okay. So clarify that for me, please.
If you divide it by 12, that means per apartment per month. So the 109 is per year per unit.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So, okay. Okay. Well, that sounds okay. Thank you.
Okay. Vice Chair Haynes-Livesey.
Now I'll talk. Okay, thank you. No, I just wanted to say with regards to the mailers, I know it sounds silly at times in 2021 to talk about we're going to send paper through the mail to people. And it just sounds like this thing that it's like, ugh, I get paper in the mail. Why? But it really does actually, for some people, resonate. And when you go to take it away, it does leave a sucking void. I've been in situations where we've tried to move people from paper to digital, and not everyone's into it. And if not everyone's into it when it's a service that they're receiving that they pay for, you have to imagine if it's something they may not even be aware is in the community and available to them, they really need to have that paper. They need to have that touch. I mean, I do still know of people in our community who have no idea about rent stabilization, and these are highly educated individuals, so it's not like they're just living in a hole in the ground and they don't know what's going on in their community. They just really don't know the ins and outs of it. I was talking to one of them recently, and he's like, yeah, I know that they can't raise my rent more than a certain amount year over year, but I don't know what you really do, and I don't know how you figure out if they are. And so if we have people in the community who don't know what we do, we need the outreach, because we're clearly not getting to everybody, and we need to get there. So I definitely can't support cutting any of our outreach stuff. And with the slim down budget, I just want to reiterate from my suggestion, if we were to do it, I wasn't saying take the reserve down to zero and cut legal. I was actually saying take $20K from litigation with the 31 to the reserve, and then if we needed to swing some of that 31 back to litigation, we have it available for the swing. I wasn't actually trying to take 51. So just clarification there.
Okay. Any other comments? Committee Member Ramos.
Sorry, I forgot to lower my hand. I'm good.
Okay. Committee Member Grunwald.
Sure. Yeah. I don't think I have the votes to really revise any light items based off of comments, but I think I'll. I think all of this has been good, or it's been easy decisions to this point, right? We've been able to bring down the fee every year, and staff has come up with recommendations, and we've been able to accept those recommendations without much hard deliberation, because we've had the funds, and this is the first time that we don't really have the funds. We have to go back and ask for more. And for that, I mean, I guess where I would counter with some of the mailers and things you can rationalize, yes, there are some people who would never be reached by email, but then there are other jurisdictions that have had rent control for a long time, and they may have inserts into leases that they make that a regulation, right? That you have to insert into a lease certain disclosures about local laws. I mean, so we could, at the point of someone signing a lease, especially new people who are signing a lease, we could enforce that. Here's our number. It's always there. There could be new ideas
already.
too.
Yeah, that's already.
Yeah, okay.
You already adopted that. Yeah.
Right. So thank you for reminding me of that. It's a good idea. I think the question then is like, how much incremental awareness are we driving by still mailing to every single? We mail to. Sorry, Yonki, correct me if I'm wrong on this. We still mail to every address of a rented unit.
Rent controlled unit.
Yeah. And so, I think early on, we definitely got a lot of value out of that. I think there's also a case to be made that now we're not probably getting the incremental value out of each additional mailer. Even though it is new regs, maybe a new reg summary could be every 3 months instead of having it be every month for the folks who are aware that this exists. So I think there is a legitimate discussion to be had. It doesn't sound like, it sounds like I'm an outlier here, but it will be tough to swallow an increase after, if we look at the broad. I hear what everyone's saying about there may be things coming down the road this year that we don't know. Just like this year, we didn't know what was going to happen this year. It's a strange year for sure. But if I look at it at a high level, our litigation is not what it was 3 years ago. We have less litigation. We have fewer petitions, and we're going to have even fewer M&I petitions as we get further from the base year. We may have more capital improvements, but I kind of think that's what the reserve is for. So, to say that now I understand. I think the community appreciates the $85 reduction that we made for COVID, and just say we had a zero reserve year, and that we go back up to the last fee that we had prior. That seems really easy to explain, and like we're in it with the community. Raising it from there seems like it'll be tough, but I've said that before, so thank you.
Thank you, Committee Member Grunwald. Any other comments? Does anyone want to pose a friendly amendment or go ahead with a motion?
We don't really need motions. We want just feedback from the Rental Housing Committee. Maybe you can take a straw vote. Do you want to leave the budget as is?
That's what I was thinking.
Do you propose a little change to any of the numbers? Just bring it back to us so we can finalize it for the next meeting.
Yeah, I was going to suggest we start with a straw poll of leaving the recommendation of $109 per unit per year and see what the vote comes out for that. Andrea, can you poll the committee?
Yes, I apologize. Matt, I'm starting with you just because I'm reading backwards through the attendance list. So I will begin with Committee Member Grunwald.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, based on my comments, I think I'd prefer that we try to find 100 and whatever would be required to bring it down to $101 fee. So not supportive of the current budget.
Committee Member Rosas.
Supportive of the current budget.
Thank you. Committee Member Ramos.
I am supportive of the current budget as is. I am willing to go down, but I am supportive of the current budget as is.
Vice Chair Haynes Livesay.
I am supportive of the current budget. I would love to see if we could do a small, tiny little bit just as a little give, but if this is the budget, I would not object to it.
And finally, Chair Almond.
I'm supportive of the current budget as proposed.
Thank you.
Does anyone want to do another straw vote for any other suggestions that were out there?
Would anybody be open to my proposal of taking the 20K from litigation and maintaining the 31 in reserve? Or even like 10K from litigation, just something to drop it down so it's not 85 to 109. So there's some sort of little ledge off. I mean, a buck's a buck, but you know.
So that would bring us to either 107 or 108.
Correct.
You think that people would even notice?
I mean, I think that when people are looking at, are you requesting money from me to spend in ways that I don't necessarily agree with? It's death by 1,000 paper cuts, right? So if somebody came to me and said, I need $109 from you, and I'm going to spend, and I'm just going to use arbitrary numbers here, I'm going to spend, of that $109, I'm going to spend 103 of it on stuff that you're really not supportive of, and then I'm going to spend $5 of it on stuff you're okay with, and then the other, dollar, I'm just going to throw in a bank account for the future. Like, emotionally, that hurts me. I might have the $109, but I'm not going to be super interested in giving it to that particular person if I don't have to. So I guess as something to say, hey, we hear you. It is a big ramp up from 85 to 109, albeit it's still a large ramp down from 155. I think that talking about what litigation has actually cost us year over year and tweaking that number since it does make more than $1 difference, is at least a place we could tweak. And if we're thinking about a budget as we want to fund the needs, as opposed to we want to target a number, I think it's someplace we could talk about a tweak.
Thank you. Committee Member Ramos.
I just don't know if that's, how do I say this? The difference from 109 to like 107, is that even worthwhile? I guess that question should go to Committee Member Grunwald, because I know you're trying to drive it down. Like 101 would be worthwhile to drive down, but like I'm not willing to do the cuts necessary for the 101. So like it's a weird kind of compromise. Is this like worthwhile for that, or is it not? And that's where I'm at. I bet Vice Chair Haynes Lipsey is taking it from like the reserves and hopefully using the reserves to backfill if we need the litigation. So in my mind, that's from the reserves, and that's within my okay cycle in my head. But it's like $2 difference, and then I don't know if that is a worthwhile drive down for people. And I guess that is a question that I'm asking you, as opposed to like going from 109 to 107, as opposed to 109 to 101.
I think in general, I'm trying on each line item to pressure test our original hypothesis, or revisit our original hypothesis for each one, right? So we talked about the helpline. I'm sold. I mean, the helpline needs to go up, actually, right? But then again, the more I don't know if we have survey research about awareness of rent control among our renters or among landlords of now versus what it was years ago. So sorry, to answer your question, I'd like us to get closer to calibrating what's necessary for each line item. And I think for litigation in general, I think, Karen, we wouldn't take it to a trial unless we believed that we were in the right and that we could win. And if we win, we are going to collect from that party their fees that they have not been paying for years, right? So we wouldn't want to just have a litigation budget just to litigate, right? We have it to control and manage and administer the system, which is what we're supposed to do from the voters, right? And sorry, Karen, maybe I'm taking that.
Well, I want to be careful. I do not want to discuss the substance of litigation in the open session. But remember, we didn't bring this litigation, so we don't really control whether it goes to trial or not.
I see. Yes, but sorry. The larger point, I don't know the specifics, and I have not kept up with the specifics of that case. More so to say that I wouldn't. I want us to have enough to be able to pursue the litigation that we need to pursue, but not have too much of an overage that it's the extra is unnecessary. So for that one, yeah, I mean, so if we do think that one will go to trial, then maybe we only take a small amount, as Nicole has proposed. But even that small amount, us getting closer to what the reality is, that seems good to me. I mean, I think the $100 number would be a symbolic win for us, or 101 that we're maintaining. But outside of that, then I'm just looking for each line item to be deserved and efficient in what we're doing, and not to. We always want to have some buffer, but not too much buffer. Long story short, yes, I'd be supportive of it, but I'm not looking to push it down artificially.
I have one question. The monies that we saved on personnel, is there any way to use that to cut down the costs or the fees?
So any amount of this year's budget that we have not spent ends up in the end balance. That end balance becomes the beginning balance of the next fiscal year, and that part that comes from this fiscal year is not even used to calculate the fee, because that was fees from previous years. For instance, if we have just random numbers,
Yeah.
If we have $500,000 left from this year because we didn't spend all the money that was budgeted for, so we have $500,000 that we can use for next year. So if the total budget would be $2 million, but we already have $500,000 in our savings account, we only calculate the fee over 1.5 million. Because that's the new extra money we need for that fiscal year. So that's how that works. So yes, that's a long answer to your question. Yes, and we are already using that.
Okay. So by the straw poll, we have 4 in favor of maintaining the budget that you proposed. And then 3 people would sort of like it if we could somehow tweak out a few more dollars so the fee is reduced. I'm not sure that staff, do you feel like you have enough direction or do you want more?
No, I need more direction. I do need an answer from the complete rental housing committee. Do you want to reduce any of the budget line items and by how much? So I can present that to you next time.
That's what I thought. Okay.
So why don't you do a straw poll off to see if you have a majority of what that slight reduction would look like, and if that even carries through the rental housing committee.
And that's the straw poll for the $20,000 reduction in litigation.
If that's
services.
what someone wants to propose.
Vice Chair Haynes-Lipsey, that was your idea. Do you want to come up with a idea for the straw poll?
Sure. So my idea for the straw poll would be to modify the budget by reducing the litigation line item by 20,000 so that we have 80,000 budgeted there. And then to see if anyone else supports that idea.
Okay, let's take a poll.
Okay, here we go.
Can I get
Sorry.
clarification on that? So this is just money from the litigation budget, but assuming that we'll fill it in with the reserve budget if we need it, correct?
That is indeed how a reserve works, yes. A reserve can be used to fill in pretty much any gap, right, Anki?
Well, you can either say, I don't want to touch the reserve, so I come back to the rental housing committee mid-year for a change of the budget, or you decide to take the extra money if needed from the reserve. Yeah.
Okay. Andrea, go ahead.
All right, so we'll begin with committee member Grunwald.
Aye.
Committee member Rosas.
You're muted.
I was just looking at the PowerPoint and thinking, where could we move this? So I'm at a loss, so I'm gonna abstain from this one.
Committee member Ramos.
I'll vote yes.
Vice Chair Haynes-Lipsey.
Yes. With the ability to raid the reserve, yes.
And Chair Almond.
No.
Thank you.
So for me, that means I'm going to come back with a budget in the next meeting, lowering the litigation line item $20,000. And at that point, you can either adopt or reject the budget still. I hope you're going to adopt it, because otherwise we're running out of time before the fiscal year ends. Yeah.
Very good point. Okay.
Chair, I'm just wondering if is there any interest in us having another zero reserve year? If anyone is interested in that, we don't have to do a straw poll. Looks like I've got a couple head shaking. So okay, I will retract. I'll retract that as a.
Having been on a board that really messed with their reserves and gotten into a lot of financial trouble, I couldn't bear it personally.
I think we still do have 380,000 or so.
Yeah.
So I mean, it would just be the 31, but
right.
That's fair. That's fair.
Right. Okay. If there is no more discussion, I think we're going on to 9.2. CSFRA Annual General Adjustment of Rent for 2021. And there's a staff presentation.
Thank you, Chair Almond, and good evening, committee members. Item 9.2 is the 2021 Annual General Adjustment of Rent as allowed under the CSFRA. The purpose of staff's presentation this evening is to establish the allowed percentage of the CSFRA Annual General Adjustment of Rent for 2021. And to give a little background information here, CSFRA Section 1707, so this is actually part of the charter, states that no later than June 30th of each year, the Rental Housing Committee shall announce the amount of the annual general adjustment of rent, which shall be effective as of September of that year. And to give a little bit more background information, the annual general adjustment of rent is the percentage by which the rent for fully covered units may be increased each year. There is only one increase allowed per 12-month period, and the increase must be between 2 and 5%. So 2% is the floor and 5% is the ceiling. Should the consumer price index differential be above or below that, it is not allowed as mandated by the requirements under the CSFRA. Additionally, the law states that it must be 100% of the CPIU all items for a 12-month period ending in March. The index that is used to calculate this actually only publishes the CPI every 2 months, either in February or in April. And the Rental Housing Committee at a previous meeting has chosen to adopt the yearly overlook from February to February. And so this year, the differential between year over year is 1.6%. As mentioned previously, it cannot be below 2%, which means that the AGA for 2021 is 2% as required by the CSFRA. And for implementing this rent increase, landlords are allowed to raise the rent using this AGA effective from September 1st of 2021 onward until August 31st of 2022, at which time it would become a banked increase. And it is required that property owners provide a 30-day written notice of rent increases and that they must be in compliance with the CSFRA to raise the rent by the AGA. And the recommendation from staff is to adopt a resolution for an annual general adjustment of 2% for 2021. And this concludes staff's presentation.
Are there any questions from the committee? I'm not seeing any questions, comments. Then I guess I can go ahead and ask for public comment, right? Would any member of the public on the line like to provide comment on this item? If so, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. Staff will display a countdown timer on the screen. Okay, Alex Brown.
Hey, the fact that there's a floor at all makes me sad, and I wonder how much money is going to, how much money in excess of the actual CPI people are going to be charged because of the existence of the floor in the CSFRA. But hey, we hit it, so that's something. Thanks.
Thank you, Alex Brown. I'm not seeing any other. Okay, Tim McKenzie, go ahead.
I'd also like to say that I don't like the idea of a floor. And, you know, again, this year is a perfect example that it's been very hard for the most vulnerable of us, and RHC will need to do a lot of work to help stabilize the community. And thanks for the work that you do. I use my time.
Thank you very much, Tim McKenzie. And I'll bring it back to the committee. Are there any questions or comments at this point? Or are we ready for a motion? Oh, committee member Ramos.
I'm just willing to make the motion. I move that we adopt a resolution adopting the AGA of 2%. I don't know if I'm reading that right. I'm trying to find it in the I think that's probably a decent way of just saying it, right? Good? We're good. Okay. I move that we adopt the resolution adopting the new AGA of 2%.
Is there a second?
I will second if no one else is going to.
Thank you, Vice Chair Haynes and Lucy. We're ready for a vote. Andrea?
Thank you. We will begin with Committee Member Grunwald.
Aye.
Committee Member Ramos.
Aye.
Committee Member Rosas.
Aye.
Vice Chair Haynes Livesay.
Aye.
And Chair Almond.
Aye.
This motion passes unanimously, 5 votes to 0. Thank you.
Thank you all. Moving on to 9.3.
And item 9.3 is staff presentation regarding the consumer price indices for Mnoi petitions. So bear with me, it gets a little consumer price index heavy this evening. We're going to talk about 2 indexes. We just talked about one of them. That one does not have, that conversation about the AGA does not play into this conversation about the Mnoi petition adjustment CPI, except that you could have them be the same index. So just keep that kind of global idea in mind as we go through the presentation. So a little bit of background. The CSFRA was enacted to stabilize the community by reducing rental housing turnover, and it has 3 main objectives. One is to stabilize rents, the other is to provide eviction protections, and that last goal there is federally required under the Constitution, and it's to ensure a fair rate of return on investment for property owners. And how that plays out in this is Section 1700 of the CSFRA, so again, of the actual law, states that housing providers are entitled to a fair and reasonable return on their investment. And that's achieved 3 ways. One is what we just discussed, the annual general adjustment of rent of 100% of the CPI-U for the Bay Area region. Number 2 is vacancy decontrol. This is the way that most of the ensuring a fair rate of return on investment is achieved in rent stabilized units. So basically this means that when a person moves out of a unit that's rent controlled, the next person that moves into the unit can have that rent sent by the landlord at whatever amount that the landlord wants. And third is the individual petitions for upward adjustment of rent, which we discussed a little bit around the budget, and we're going to discuss a little bit more now. We're only looking at M&OI petitions, so that's the maintenance of net operating income petition, not at capital improvement petitions, as they are not affected by or subject to a CPI index. So the Rental Housing Committee has authority to determine regulations related to the petition process. Sections 1708, 1710, and 1711 of the CSFRA charge the RHC with promulgating regulations that establish rules and regulations for the administration and enforcement of the CSFRA, that implement the petition process, and that provide landlords with a mechanism for achieving a fair rate of return that addresses individualized circumstances. And in this case, it's the petition process and the M&OI process that we're looking at specifically. Previously, the Rental Housing Committee adopted CSFRA regulations in Chapter 6 that define a fair return as the maintenance of net operating income for the base year as adjusted by the CPI. And there are two specific ways that we look at CPI. One is the one that we just talked about, the annual general adjustment. And then next is the fair return standard. And this is what we're talking about tonight. Again, the fair return standard in relationship to M&OI petitions. And right now it's defined as the consumer price index for all urban consumers for rent of primary residence in the San Francisco, Oakland, Hayward metropolitan areas as published by the United States Department of Labor and the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It's within the RHC's purview to review and revise these regulations as necessary. And in November of 2018, Chair Ortiz requested a monthly CPI update to and quarterly comparisons between the two indices. And then last month, the RHC requested reconsideration of the CPI for M&OI petitions. And I do want to mention that the rent of primary residence index was chosen in July of 2017. Staff had originally recommended the CPI all items, which is what we're recommending tonight, to be in line with the AGA and be in line with all other jurisdictions that have rent control and utilize M&OI petitions. They all use the CPI all items, all urban consumers, and that is what was originally recommended by staff. We also, during that presentation, looked at the CPI housing, and ultimately the CPI rent of primary residence was chosen by the Rental Housing Committee for these petitions. And we can take a look here at the indices and how they work. So basically what we're saying here is we're looking at three different indices tonight: the all items, all urban consumers, the CPI housing, and the CPI rent of primary residence. And the all items is a basket of goods. Like you can see here, the list is actually quite extensive and quite long. This is a snapshot of a portion of the all items basket. Everything that you see kind of over to the side here are baskets, are items of goods in or services in that all items basket. So when we look at an index like the housing index or the primary residence index, it is part of what makes up the all items basket of goods. And because of this, they reflect the change in price of fewer goods in the basket. So instead of having that big extensive list of goods, there's only a few. And in this case, housing is looking at shelter, the rent of primary residence, so how much it costs to rent a unit in a specific location. And it also looks at home ownership equivalency of rent of residence, which is very complicated. These baskets of goods that are smaller, that only contain a few items, are much more volatile than the CPI all items, which is another reason why the CPI all items was originally recommended by staff, because it is a less volatile index. And the rent of primary residence is a more volatile index than the housing index for the same reason. So that housing index takes a look at shelter, rent of primary residence, and other pieces. And then the rent of primary residence is only looking at rent. So the changes in that index are much more susceptible to market swings, including steeper increases in CPI and steeper decreases. And so when we're looking at, again, to provide an overview, when we're looking at CPI, the Consumer Price Index, it's a change in the cost of goods and services over time. That's the whole basket. When we're looking at rent of primary residence, all we're looking at is the changes in the cost of rent over time. And again, with housing, we're looking at the changes in the cost of the entire basket of housing only. But that's the part of the bigger all items basket that we do recommend for the MNOI petitions. And so just to give you an example of how this plays out, to illustrate the volatility of the indexes, the green line here is the change in the Consumer Price Index over time from 2001 to 2020 by year. So you can see this all items is much more stable than the housing index, which is the blue line, and far more stable than the red line, which is the one we currently use for MNOI petition adjustments. And it's quite up and down right now. So again, all other jurisdictions use the all items, all urban consumers index, otherwise known as CPIU, because it is more stable. So how do we calculate net operating income, and what does this mean? Maintenance of net operating income petitions are based on a calculation that determines whether the annual general adjustment of rent maintains the property's net operating income from the base year to the petition year. And if that calculation results in a negative number, then the property and the unit might be subject to an increase greater than the annual general adjustment of rent. So what does this look like? Right now, these are the indexes that we review. This is what we reviewed last month. This shows the change in the CPI compounded year over year for the annual general adjustment petition increases. So what this is saying is that from December 2017 to April 2021, there was a 20% change in this index over those years. And the other two indexes are currently both at 26%. So when we get a petition, what happens is the base year's operating income is adjusted for inflation using the correct percentage for the time period covered by the petition year. So if you filed your petition in April of 2021 and your petition year was, let's say it was the calendar year for 2020, then right now your base year operating income would be adjusted up by 26% based on this index. If the Rental Housing Committee chose the housing index, it would have been 23%. And if the Rental Housing Committee had chosen the all items basket, it would be 17%. Typically, trend-wise, we see about a 10% difference between the all items basket and the rent of primary residence basket because of the fluctuations in the housing market, and especially rent right now, and because of the fluctuations in energy costs and the costs of transportation and the purchasing of large items like cars. The all items basket has gone up in the past few months, making the index a little bit more closely matched to each other than they typically trend year over year. But we do anticipate that will stabilize and that the rent of primary residence will trend upward soon. So what does this mean for the petitions that we've actually received? So right now we use the, we're looking at the all items, all urban consumers index. And these are the petitions that were filed over the past few years. You can see their petition year here. And the Mnoi petition increase that, the CPI increase of based on what the all items index would have been. And that would have led to this amount over here per unit. And we're going to look at this on a chart that shows everything together too. For the housing index, you can see the difference here. It's gone up because the percentage is higher for what the CPI would allow for that base year adjustment. And then for the rent of primary residence, it's higher again, leading to a higher increase in rent allowed under the petition process. So what does that mean if we're looking at the indices that the index that we use versus the other index? So for the difference between what a landlord would have been able to receive from their petition and what a tenant's rent would have been increased by, you can see that difference here. So the rent of primary residence is what we currently use, and this is what was allowed under the petition. Whether or not the landlord decided to use that was up to them. And this is what it would have been had it been the all items index. So as you can see, the difference here is the rent could have been raised by $79 more by using the rent of primary residence CPI, which is again the one we use, was $20 more for this petition. This petition was not did not qualify for an increase under any of the indexes. They had a profit. It was $167 difference between the two indexes for this petition here. And again, you can see it's quite a substantial difference between the different petitions and the different indexes. And then this is what the difference is when you look at using the housing versus rent index. So we are looking here, you can see that if we had chosen the CPI housing instead of all items, the difference, or instead of CPI rent, the difference would be $22 a month, $18, $67, just based on the different things that were the different outcomes of the petitions and the different use of that index there. So that is a quick overview of the Mnoi adjustment and the CPI for that adjustment. And staff is recommending that the RHC adopt the San Francisco, Oakland, Hayward CPIU, which is the same thing as saying the CPI all items, all urban consumers, for use in both the AGA and the fair return standard contexts. This is already your index for the AGA, and staff recommends that you pull it in line with the AGA for the fair return petition process. And that concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you very much, Patricia. That was a great presentation. Are there any comments or questions from, starting with questions from the committee? Vice Chair Haynes-O'C? Oh, your hand was raised. You didn't mean it to be raised.
I didn't know my hand was raised.
Yes, for a nanosecond there it was.
Oopsie.
Okay. Vice Chair, you're not, I'm sorry. Committee Member Ramos, I'll get it right eventually.
You're all learning. Do we have any current petitions that are using the current CPI as it is, and what happens if we change it?
That's a great question. We have a petition that's currently on hold that was filed quite a while ago, pre-pandemic, and that petition is strictly on hold at this time. So we would have to take into consideration what the petitioner would want to do at this point, because at this point it's quite outdated because it has been on hold for so long.
Okay, committee member Grunwald.
Sure. Maybe my question's for Karen. Karen, is there any kind of legal exposure or downside to changing something where decisions have been made on prior petitions?
The law changes from time to time, and you basically proceed as the law is at the time you file your petition. So I don't think anybody can go back and try to change what was done.
Okay. With the new information, would anyone? I guess in this case, it would potentially be reduced, so landlords wouldn't be incentivized to resubmit their petitions. But I guess then could tenants reopen a petition based on that information?
No, the petitions are final after the appeal period is run. If they're not appealed, they're final. They can't reopen it on that basis.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I'm not seeing any other hands raised. I guess that means we go to the public. Would any member of the public on the line like to provide comment on this item? If so, please click the hand raise button in Zoom or press 9 on your phone. Staff will display a countdown timer on the screen. Edie Keating, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. So I strongly support changing to the MNOIs to use the all items CPI. The reason for rent stabilization is because the community chooses to limit rents. Not all Bay Area rents are controlled. Using a broad housing index, as we can see, has been always higher and is biased to be always higher, with an impact to the negative impact to tenants. It will rise faster than CPI. What do wages go up by for the renters? Very often, wages go up by the CPI if they get a raise. So if their rents are going up by more than CPI, renters are getting poorer. This was not the intent of the of Measure V. The capital improvement process lets even landlords who are making a fair rate of return, or could I say making a very fair rate of return, be allowed to pass through eligible capital costs. So that recent adoption gave landlords more options for ensuring their rate of return. With this recent move to the benefit of landlords, the current playing field is generous to landlords. Using any CPI other than the same one for AGA, I feel is making the playing field biased against tenants. And I think it's a good time and a right time to correct this and use the all index AGA for any MNOI petitions. Thank you.
Alex Brown.
I mean, this sounds good to me. Harmonize those indices. Going from both the graphs and the tables. And injustice has been done, and it's time to fix it and just bring it back to, yes, like Edie said, the reason we have the CSFRA, which is to keep rent raises in line with the actual cost of living increases and theoretically the cost, the increase in wages and workers. Although, as you said, a lot of people don't even get that. So it's well beyond time to fix this. Let's bring some harmony to the force of Mnoi petitions. Thanks.
Thank you, Alex Brown and Edie Keating. Any other attendees wishing to speak? I don't see any other hands raised. Thank you for your input. I'll bring it back to the committee. If there are no comments or questions, does anyone want to tender a motion?
I will motion.
We'll make a motion. Okay, the motion, if you're wanting to approve this, it has to include the words to adopt a resolution identifying replacement index for maintenance of net operating income calculations in the petition for upward adjustment of rent. Got that?
I will motion to adopt the San Francisco, Oakland, Hayward CPIU, all items for use in both AGA and fair return standard context. I hope I said it right.
Sounds good to me. Is there a second?
I will second it.
Andrea, do you want to poll the committee?
Sure, we will begin again with committee member Grunwald.
I'll abstain from this one.
Thank you, committee member Grunwald.
Committee member Rosas.
Yay! Oh my goodness.
Committee member Ramos.
Aye.
Vice Chair Haynes-Luce.
Aye.
And Chair Almond.
Aye. That was much easier than I thought it was going to be. I had all kinds of things to say, but I'm delighted. I think this is a long time coming. And I think it will bring more stability to renters. It'll also mean that landlords know what they can depend on from year to year, and it will match our AGA. I think it'll streamline the process in some ways. I'm absolutely thrilled. I know members of the community have been hoping for this for 4 years. I guess we go to Patricia again.
I will keep it brief tonight on the monthly status report. Just to share a few highlights, we've given 25 workshops with 181 attendees. This does not include our eviction moratorium or rent relief workshops. We've had 35 office hours, and this is actually 2 hours during these time periods with 39 attendees. And we've done 8 mailings. This is not only postcards, but also includes newsletters and communications with property owners specifically. We've also sent out 29 email updates. I would like to highlight that we have 102 mediations and conciliations through the Mountain View mediation program, and 90 of those have been resolved, which is fantastic. This reduces, this is another reason why our petition expenditures are lower than other jurisdictions and why we receive fewer petitions, because our mediation program through the city helps us address those situations that would routinely and regularly end up in petitions. So I do want to highlight that work. And we have, you'll see here, 646 termination notices received, with a bump up of 37 that were highlighted as withdrawn from market. Those are actually related to a project that started all the way back in 2019, and the termination notices were just served. So that does not have a reflection on anything that we've have going into redevelopment currently. So we still have 0 properties going into redevelopment for calendar year 2021, and 13 households have received assistance from our relocation agency for the calendar year. But again, this is all in relationship to properties that went into redevelopment previously. We have received 1 additional petition. We had a whole bunch of petitions be decided after the appeal process was completed for the appeal that you heard. And we had 1 petition go into appeal, which you will be hearing at a rental housing committee meeting in the future. And I also want to take a look here just to highlight very quickly that the market appears to be rebounding rent rate wise for average market rent for all types of units in the city. And this includes CSFRA covered units. You can see we hit a floor back about 3 quarters ago, and it has popped back up. And the vacancy rate for all units is stabilizing as well. And I'm going to hand it over to Andrea unless there's questions on the monthly status report.
I do have a question. So I'm just curious. I know the city is doing a newsletter now. It used to be like a COVID briefing, but now it's evolved to a different name, and I get it, but I totally forget the name of it now. Have we either, and maybe we aren't allowed to due to data privacy, but have we either thought about doing some friendly information sharing with that list and or putting some stuff about us in that newsletter from time to time?
That's a great suggestion. The View, the big newsletter that went out, had information about the eviction moratorium and the rent relief programs. That was the focus for that. And we can definitely check with the city manager's office to see if we can put any kind of information about rent stabilization or any of the programs that we have that we're focusing on in it. That's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to hand it over to Andrea unless there's any other questions.
All right, so we'll briefly go over these programs for COVID-19 tenant landlord programs from the state and the city. I'm going to briefly just touch on them. I want to highlight a little bit more about our upcoming webinars that we're having, and then some outreach that we did this past week. So we'll start with the schedule. So we have some eviction moratorium webinars coming up. 2, we break them out again, as always, landlord focused and tenant focused. All of our tenant focused webinars are bilingual. So we have some coming up at the end of this month, May 25th at 3 for landlords and May 26th at 6:30 for tenants. And again, we have one in June 29th for our landlords. And we will be scheduling more as we need them and as we sort of coordinate with our translations team and put in more dates. But this is what we have so far. We are also having some rent relief workshops in June. We did do a couple just this month, last week. So we will be having another set for landlords and tenants on the week of June 15th and 16th there.
And we do have a landlord-focused one for rent relief applications tomorrow at 3 o'clock.
So the state,
Sorry, have you? So we're getting there's state rent relief now, and that is what you're doing with the webinars to go over how they can get that. Do you have any sense of how that is going? Like, is it hard? Is it easy? Like, how are people navigating through that so far?
So our webinars, we do break it down sort of, basically a tutorial, step-by-step tutorial for the rent relief. So we have a lot of screenshots. It is a heavy lift for tenants, but we are providing as much support as we can for the application process. And Project Sentinel, who of course is our helpline, we're lucky enough that they are actually a partner with the state for the rent relief program. So they are in a lot of behind the scenes meetings. They know all the ins and outs of the program. So they're able to really help people, just walk them through step by step and give them as much support as they need. And so that brings us to this slide, which is the state rent relief program. So both tenants and landlords are able to apply for this money. The tenants do have to qualify by being affected by COVID-19, financially impacted, and they must make 80% or less of the area median income. And those who are making 50% or less are going to be prioritized. We do still have funds available for the City of Mountain View's rent relief program that's run through the Community Services Agency. The city just added additional funds to that pot of money. So we are encouraging people to apply regardless if it's their first time or their fourth time. We're encouraging them to apply for these funds. The income threshold for this was bumped up to 80% recently. So now it's in line with the state's rent relief program, which is nice because now if a tenant is qualifying for the state, they also know that they're qualifying here for the city's program. And the best way to reach out to them is through email at renthelp@csacares.org. And we are also encouraging everybody to reach out to them again for a status update of their application if they haven't heard anything in a little while.
And I also want to mention here that we've reassessed the application process, and the rent stabilization staff has redesigned the applications and how that process works. So they closely match and track with the state's process. Which makes it much easier for applicants. Again, like Andrea said, not only did we take into consideration the income thresholds for the state program, but also what's required of the state program is now very similar to what's required of the application for CSA. So people aren't doing double work, and they're now fillable forms. If people have access to computers, they can do that directly on their computer. And we have a follow-up checklist for people to be working on while they're waiting for CSA to contact them. So the process is different than it has been, and hopefully we'll be able to assist more people going forward. And there's also a major update from the county, as the county's homelessness prevention system is also starting to implement a huge rent relief program through that for county residents, which include Mountain View residents, who are 30% or below the area median income. That is going into effect. It either went into effect this week or last week. So there's a lot here, but all people need to do is contact us to get directed to who they should be talking.
Right. Yep. So I think it went into effect last week. We had it up when we did our event, but it had some hiccups to it still. So hopefully that gets all smoothed out. And again, just contact the helpline because they know all of the ins and outs of all of the programs that people can apply for assistance. And also there's a mortgage relief that's available through SB 91 for small landlords, and those are owners of 4 or fewer properties, with each property having no more than 4 rental units. And also through Project Sentinel, there is HUD certified mortgage counseling. Again, we are recommending that if anybody finds themselves in a situation where they're having a hard time paying their mortgage, just to reach out to the helpline, and we can connect you to the correct resources. And the city also is still having the utility relief program, which offers that one-time credit that you can apply towards a utility payment, and that would be water, sewer, garbage, or recycling. They will qualify you by income, and services are not going to be shut off during the pandemic for any non-payment, and penalties and interest will be waived. Late fees there. So if and this is for anybody in the city, not just CSFRA units or landlords, and that can be taken advantage of through our email at revenuestaff@mountainview.gov, and that's directly linking you to our finance department for those programs.
And when tenants and landlords apply to the rent relief program through the state, there's also utility relief through that program. So we are really hoping that more people are aware and applying for that state program.
And so I think we'll just briefly touch on some of the outreach we did. Last week we had a huge push for our first in-person event, which was last Thursday. We held it right outside of the senior center in the front. We had plenty of parking and, good visibility there for people. We partnered up with the county who had held a program for vaccine signups in the past. So we sort of pulled all of our resources together to have a joint rent relief and vaccine sign-up outreach from 4 to 7 o'clock in the evening last Thursday. And we gathered a bunch of our community organizations. So it was ourselves, the city, Project Sentinel, of course, there, who are experts. We had CSA there and a couple staff members from CSA who had access to their database and the information, and were able to look people up right on site and give them status updates for their application, which thankfully most people had at least applied for 1 month. There was only one person who came who didn't hear about, hasn't heard about it at all, but everybody else had, which is great. We also had some volunteers from our Spanish Leadership Academy here at the city, which was amazing because I'm going to say 90% of everybody who came was predominantly Spanish speaking. So it was great to have our volunteers out there. And we also had the community action team, CAT, working with the county for the vaccine signups, and they were giving away some free goodies like hand sanitizer, masks, and wipes to the community. So that was great. When somebody got a person at their table, we just bounced them over to the other group. So we were able to serve everybody that showed up for us. We had paper forms available for people to sign out for the rent relief. We also had laptops and computers for the state program. And we were actually able to help quite a few families work their way mostly all the way through the state rent relief program. The only thing they would have to do is gather their documents and upload them. But we did sign them up for a virtual office hours appointment for additional help for anybody who needed it. So it was a wonderful event, and it was great to meet all of our other partners in person. And we're definitely excited, and everybody was enthused to schedule another in-person outreach event. And we even had other community members asking how they can join up with us and be trained to volunteer in the next event.
And for that next rent relief application event, we're looking at probably the first weekend or the second weekend in June on a Saturday. So it was specifically requested that it be on a weekend, and we're going to honor that request as best we can.
Yeah, that's it for COVID-19 related outreach. Any questions there?
It looks like Committee Member Grunwald and Vice Chair Haynes-Lipsyte both have questions.
Whoever's first.
Go ahead, Nicole.
Okay, mine should be easy. I'm just curious, is there any data sharing allowed, permitted, not breaking privacy regulations, where basically if I, like, let's say I find the city's rent relief, can, by putting in my application to that, I get information fed to me about some of the other programs like the utility relief and the state program, or the state program get fed from the city, or is that all against privacy laws in California?
I'm not positive on the answer to that. I know CSA at this point, one, they have a lot of resources outside of just the City of Mountain View's fund that they're already connecting people to once they get them in as a client. So just as part of the case management for each tenant that comes in, they're going to let them know what other relief is available to them. And now included in that would, of course, be the state's relief. However, I would imagine it would be much harder for us to know or get access to the state's information and then track that back to let people know about the city's rent relief.
Okay, I just figured I'd ask. Thank you.
The state will be referring people for that 30% AMI county program, but not for our City of Mountain View program specifically. What was the other thing I wanted to mention there? The rent relief provided through the state is pretty comprehensive and covers, we hear right now that it will likely be bumped up. Right now it covers 80% of all past due rent. And with the caveat that property owners have to,
Forgive.
Thank you. 20% of the past due rent. However, the state is currently signaling that they will likely cover 100% of all past due rent for people who qualify and apply for that program. So, as Andrea mentioned, landlords can apply, and then tenants can follow up, and tenants can apply, and then landlords follow up. And so it should be pretty comprehensive for a majority of renters across the state.
Awesome. Thank you.
Matt?
Sure. Thanks. I like seeing the collaboration in the live first. Glad we could start to have live events. So that's a win. I like to see the collaboration with the city, and I also noticed, a lot of there's a lot of phone numbers, there's a lot of programs, there's state programs, county programs. It's all very complicated. I think you mentioned, that Project Sentinel. Is that who you were mentioning when you said like they'd be the experts on sorting out where someone should go based on their situation? That all leads to my question of, instead of having a lot of those phone numbers, is there an opportunity, but does the city already have a contract with Project Sentinel that they're paying them separately? Or is there an opportunity for us to have a housing hotline that would essentially, like the city could also pay into, and this comes back to our budget conversation of, could we potentially say by collaborating with the city to have funnel everyone to a housing hotline that's manned by Project Sentinel?
Yeah, I mean, essentially for all of our webinars that we are putting on, we are doing that because it is a little overwhelming. You're right, with all these people want to be contacted through email, these people by phone, with all the different organizations. So we put out, this is the Mountain View Rental Housing Helpline. They will be able to assist you. And if they cannot, they can connect you directly to who is able to assist you in those things. But I know Patricia has a little bit more information with their contract as far as maybe the budgeting and everything goes. Maybe you can answer those questions.
Actually, what I would like to say is that currently the CSFRA contracts with Project Sentinel for the CSFRA services, and the city has a separate contract with Project Sentinel for other housing services. So that already is that there are already two separate contracts, actually 3 separate contracts going for Project Sentinel.
And specifically for the rental housing helpline services, which is basically our case managers, right? For this program, the bulk of the people who are applying for rent relief are people who are covered by and properties that are covered by our program. So the property owners can call when they need assistance, just like if you know, when we go back to look at the monthly status report, you see all of these inquiry topics here, including COVID-19 related topics. People call the helpline for a variety of reasons, including being unable to pay the rent. And this is true pre-pandemic and, you know, during the pandemic. Eviction protections, which is also part of the eviction moratorium. We're counting that as a part of the piece of that. The services that we are already providing are still wrapped up into the services that we're providing now. So we're looking at this as a part of the services that we provide for eviction protections, and they are as well.
Yes, yeah, I'm not looking to reduce our services, but more like from an accounting standpoint. Like, do we qualify that a caller lives in Mountain View today?
So as I just mentioned, there are separate contracts with Project Sentinel. One of them is for CSFRA services. Another that exists already for 40 years is like a tenant landlord mediation program that also consults with tenants and landlords. And I think you even used that program way back in the past, Matt,
I did.
when you had questions.
Very helpful. Yes, very helpful.
So that program
I think I was in a duplex though, so that wouldn't be.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That city contract is for all tenants and landlords, no matter, you know, whether they're covered under the CSFRA or not. So non-covered CSFRA units are still covered by the city contract that exists. And then we put our layer on top of that with for all CSFRA related issues, questions, and clients.
To also directly answer the question, yes, when people call in, they specify, we find out whether or not they're fully covered or partially covered by the law, and ensure that they are Mountain View residents for the information that we're providing under our contract. So yes, they are screened that way.
Got it. Yeah, again, it's more if we had. So it sounds like we are capturing those data points. I'd be interested if we could lobby other groups to, or I was wondering if we could ask other groups to pitch in more. You know, if we are getting a lot of calls of people who are in single family homes, but it sounds like already the city is contributing a fair amount, so that doesn't seem like a viable alternative.
And mostly the calls are by people who are covered by the law.
Okay.
So yeah, we don't see a lot of single family homes calling in. It's mostly people who are fully covered by the law, fully covered, not even partially covered. It's mostly people who are fully covered by the law, whether that's landlords or tenants.
Got it. And last question: will we be collecting similar data about the new program that's the one that the city is contributing to and we're contributing to for the eviction litigation?
Yes. Yeah, we're already collecting all of that information for the services that we already provide through Project Sentinel and through our team here. And for the litigation services and the wraparound services support, we will be collecting that information as well.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Great.
Did you want me to finish up here, Andrea, or do you want to jump in?
You can go ahead.
Okay. So for our rent stabilization program webinars and office hours, these are separate from the rent relief ones and the eviction moratorium and rent relief one Andrea was sharing earlier. We have 2 upcoming rent stabilization program webinars. One is this week on May 20th, and it's about maintaining habitability. It's tenant focused and bilingual. And on May 27th at 3 o'clock, we have a property registration webinar for step-by-step instructions for people who need to register their property through our database. We also have virtual office hours every Friday, and people can sign up for those at RSP office hours. And we have our virtual coffee catch-up with small landlords, and it is focused this month on those state rent relief applications. And you can contact us here. Oh, this slide needs to be updated to our new email at mvrent@mountainview.gov, but otherwise you can contact us with these channels. So I think that's everything.
Great. Fabulous set of workshops coming up. Thank you so much. I can never believe that the 3 of you pull off as much as you do. It's just remarkable. That seems to be the end of our meeting. This must be a record. It's only 9:35.
I have one question. If I may, I would like to kind of pre-warn everybody. There is a appeal coming up, and we are probably going to schedule an extra rental housing committee meeting at the end of June. If that is necessary for this appeal hearing. So that would be June 28th. But we'll send you further communication once it's definitive.
And the other thing is that we are not dropping the idea of a team building session. We're just, we want to make sure that everybody participates, and so we're going to try and bundle it into a future meeting, probably August or September. I think it could be very helpful. And usually it's a lot of fun. All right, I think the meeting is adjourned at 9:38 p.m. The next Rental Housing Committee meeting is scheduled to be held on Monday, June 14th, 2021 at 7 p.m. Thank you, everybody. I made it through my first meeting.
Good work. Good work. You did a great job.
Good work, Susan.
Thank you. Thank you all. Appreciate your support.
Okay.